Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters in Islam. Inshallah, we are going to be talking in this video about one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attribute of power. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Allah ta'ala has the attribute of power. And Allah can do anything and everything that He wills. Allah's power is perfect. Allah's power has no beginning and no end. It's a perfect attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is powerful. Allah has the power to do whatever He wills subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah say that Allah's power is related to things which are possible to the sound intellect. The power of Allah is not related to things which are impossible to the sound intellect. If you remember, brothers and sisters, from one of the past videos, I talked about 3 different judgments of the sound intellect, and we said that one of them is called the necessarily existent, and that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His perfect attributes. The second one is called the things which are impossible to the sound intellect, and the third category is things which are possible to the sound intellect. So things which are impossible to the sound intellect are things that the sound intellect does not accept for them to exist. Things which are possible to the sound intellect are things which the sound intellect, the logic, accept for them either to exist or not to exist. Both situations are equal or are fine. For example, any of the creations is a possibility. The sound intellect accept for this creation to exist or not to exist. The sun, for example, the sound intellect accept for the sun to be circle or to be square or to be triangle, or not to exist in the first place. All those are possibilities that the sun can have or can take. The sound intellect accept for a certain city to be there without a certain street or a certain building or a certain person or a certain family or a certain shop or a certain restaurant. So the existence of a restaurant or of a human being, of any of the creations, of a street, of a building is a possibility. The sound intellect accepts for this possibility to exist, and also it accepts for this possibility not to exist. Both are equal in terms of the way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever Allah created, He willed for those things to happen. And those things are possible things. So we say that the power of Allah, which is a perfect attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is related. Here, this is a keyword that I'm using and that I learned from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and I am telling you also to use in the same context. So Allah's power, the power of Allah, is related to things which are possible to the sound intellect. The power of Allah is not related to things which are impossible to the sound intellect. As we mentioned before, impossible things to the sound intellect does not mean very difficult things. They mean things which are impossible for them to happen. The sound intellect does not accept for those impossible things to exist. For example, claiming that Allah has a partner. This is an impossible thing. The sound intellect does not accept for Allah to have a partner. Why? Because if Allah had a partner, if there was more than one God, each one of them, according to this claim, will have his own attribute of will. And since there are 2 different wills according to this claim, therefore if one of them willed for some person to be dead and the other one willed for the same person to be alive, this will lead to the impossible thing, which is a logical contradiction, having this person alive and dead at the same time, or existing and not existing at the same time, or for a wall to be white and black at the same time. Those are logical contradictions. They are impossible to exist. The sound intellect, the mind, does not accept for those impossible things to exist in the first place. When we say impossible, we are not referring to the very difficult things. We are not referring to things which are hard to imagine, because being possible, meaning you can imagine them, maybe you cannot see them. For example, the sun being a square. I can imagine that. The mind accepts for this to exist. The logic, the sound intellect accept for the sun to be triangular or square or rectangular or round. All those are different possibilities, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for the sun to be spherical or round. So this is what happened. So again, the power of Allah, which is a perfect attribute of Allah, is only related to things which are possible to the sound intellect. Allah's power, with Allah's power, He creates whatever He wills, and He destroys whatever He wills. He brings to life whatever He willed, and He brings to death whatever He willed, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's power is not related to things which are impossible to the sound intellect, or things which are necessarily existent, which is Allah's existence and Allah's attribute. Saying that, I'd like to move to the next level, or to the next step, which is, if someone who is an atheist, someone who is not a Muslim, asks a Muslim the following question, the answer is not yes or no. We don't, as Muslims, we don't answer those kinds of questions, which I will mention in a minute. We don't answer them by yes or no. I'm just telling you the answer first before I mention the question. So, if a non-Muslim, an atheist, asks a Muslim, can Allah create a partner for himself, or can Allah kill himself, or those kind of questions, those are kufr questions. They are not correct questions, and as Muslims, beware, brothers and sisters, never answer those questions by saying yes or no. We don't say yes, Allah can kill himself, because if someone says so, he is saying that there's a possibility that Allah can have an end, or might have an end, or might die, and this is kufr, this is insulting to Allah. And if someone says no, Allah cannot do something, this person is associating or is attributing weakness to Allah, which is against power. And that's why those kind of questions, we don't answer them as Muslims by either yes or no. How do we answer those questions? We say the following. We talk to the atheist or the kafir who asked us this question, and we tell him, your question is not a correct question, it's a wrong question. Your question is illogical. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the attribute of power. Allah does whatever He wills. Allah can do whatever He wills. Allah's power and Allah's will are not related to things which are impossible to the sound intellect. The power of Allah and the will of Allah are related to things which are possible to the sound intellect. Here the key word, brothers and sisters, is related versus not related. Again, I repeat, the key words in answering the mulhid or the kafir question, the key words here are saying that the power of Allah is related to the possible things, and the power of Allah is not related to things which are impossible to the sound intellect. It is impossible to the sound intellect for Allah to have an end, or for Allah to have a partner, or for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change or to transform. All those things are impossible to the sound intellect. Why? Because the one who dies, this is someone who is weak. This is someone who is not God, who because by definition of the attributes of God or Allah, Allah has no end to His existence. So if you are talking about someone or something that has an end, you are not talking about Allah, you are talking about a creation, something else. Do you see, brothers and sisters? Those questions of the mulhid, we don't say yes, we don't say no, we say your question is wrong, and Allah's power is related to possible things. They are not related to things which are impossible to the sound intellect. Inshallah, I will continue in the next video. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Fi amanillah.